We are going to change heads on the kick drum and talk about tuning the kick drum. It's very similar to other drums, but the tuning, what we're trying to accomplish with it, is just a little bit different in that we're trying to achieve a little bit different kind of sound out of the kick drum than we are out of the other drums. We experiment from time to time with different heads on the kick drum to get different sounds as we get feedback from the audio guys, and but the drums or the heads on the kick drums, they're on for a year, so that's not a frequent experiment. It's something that once a year it gets a new head on it, and we may try something different. I'm going to go through the normal process of taking the head off, just work my way around, loosen the lugs up. The different drum brands have different methods of securing the hoops on the kick drum. So with this particular, this is the claw style. You don't actually have to loosen the whole thing the whole way. You can kind of loosen it to a point and then flip it around and just let the hook hang there like that. And that's good to know because these things are a little gangly. Something to keep in mind as you're taking it off is where the kick pedal clamps onto the hoop, it kind of damages the hoop. So I always try to make sure that I put that same spot back here, and that when I put it back on, I don't get it like somewhere else, because it looks terrible. And if that ends up like on top of the drum, the drummer will see it, and subconsciously it will tell him that it's okay to abuse the drums because it already looks like crap right there. So what does it matter if it looks like crap over here too? So I just try to do little visual cues like that to try to reinforce the fact that it's a privilege for us to play drums that are of this quality, and we need to do everything that we can to take care of them so that they continue to serve us as well as they have so far. And so that's why I do things sort of in a regimented way, is because all of those things communicate something to somebody, and I want to make sure that I'm communicating what I want to communicate. So off comes the head. Most of our kick drums have some type of muffling in them. It can be a pillow, it can be a blanket. This one has a blanket, and so I just, when I have the head off, just like on every other drum, I just kind of go over it and make sure that there's no like loose screws or anything inside the drum. And then at that point, make sure that the bearing edge is clean, just like we do on the other drums, and then I'm ready to put the head on. This head is an Aquarian Super Kick 2, and we actually use this head a good bit, at least right now. It seems to work pretty well at achieving a sound that works for us in all the different rooms that we're in. So again, I'm putting the label right at the top of the drum. It'll be between these two lugs here. And then I'm taking the hoop and making sure that I put it back on the same way that it came. This edge here is different than this edge here. So I want to make sure that the correct edge is down against the head. I got my tape where the kick drum pedal clamps on there, and make sure that's right at the bottom where it belongs. Just kind of wiggle this around and make sure that it's seated well, and start bringing these claws back up here. Now I just want to make sure, because these tension rods are so long, it's easy to get the thing kind of off of where it should be. So I want to make sure that as I go around, that I have the tension rod being vertical and not sort of angled over to one side or the other. So I'm just getting a little bit of tension on there. So I'm just getting these snug, kind of evenly around the drum, like you do. And on a kick head, you can really see where there's a lack of tension because the head wrinkles because it's so big. Now, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's already some tone in the head. You hear that? So that's actually pretty even around there. So I'm going to do the same thing I always do. Just kind of gauge the tension here a little bit. So far, I'm tuning this like I would tune any other drum. It's really not, I mean, it's really not any different. It's the same. So that sounds like an E flat. I really have no idea at this point where exactly I'm going to want this head. The maple drum here that we have is a little bit different than some of the other ones. Generally on the Bubinga kits, I'm tuning the bass drum to a B. And that just, it seems to be a good playability tension-wise, and it gives it a good punch in the house. So where tuning a kick drum differs is I'm actually tuning the front and back head to the same pitch. So I'm not trying to shorten, I'm trying to get more sustain and more roundness out of the drum, because on the resonant head on the front, there's the hole cut in it where you're really cutting out a lot of that resonance to get that air movement rushing out the front of the head. So I'm going to flip this over and just let this head kind of rest it where it's at. When we get to tuning this front head, you can actually tune this. It gets a little weird here because of the hole, but we should still try to tune the head as much as we can. So let me take this one off. All right, so I got the head back on here, and I just want to go over a little bit why this head's a little bit different to work with just because of the sound hole. Across this axis, this isn't going to tune the same way, like right on this pair of lugs as it does here, because there's head across here, and across here the tension in the head has to go around the hole, so it doesn't tension quite the same right in this area as it does across the rest of the head. So I'm just going to go around here again and kind of get this set the best that I can, even this out. So it's always basically these three lugs that are the loosest, because they just don't get tension across that other part of the head. So I end up kind of clamping down on it a little bit. And then at some point you're just going to listen. And you really don't have to get this tuned nearly as precisely as another drum, because it's not making a pitch. Although it does, when you have the drum sitting like this and the blanket is not touching either head, you do get some tone out of it. So what I'm looking for is big differences. So like what I was hearing there was this pair was a little low. And that pair would be a little high. C sharp. So I think I'll leave that about where it is, and then I want to set the drum up here like this, and then I'll just whack it with a stick and see what it sounds like. And then I'm kind of that's about it. The only other thing I want to go over is how to get the little patch that goes on the kick drum head where the beater hits the head, how to get that placed in the right spot. So we'll get that set up here and then we can talk about that. All right, so I have the kick pedal attached to the hoop again, where it would be if the kick drum was in place. And then we're going to put the patch on. The patch we have here is actually, it's a double wide, so that if you have a double kick pedal, it kind of goes on like this, and then the second beater would hit this area. We don't always get this kind. There's a couple different kinds that we get. Some of the ones are just round, but they're bigger, so they're also big enough for two beaters. But this kind here is sort of specifically laid out for that. So peel the paper off, and then I want to not do that. And just kind of get it on there. And that's that. So at this point, this drum's basically done. It has a good thump to it. It's got some tone, which I like. That'll really help them in the house. Just define the drum a little bit, because it's not just a tack. There's some thump to it, and then the mic placement will help with that also. So at this point, this drum's pretty much done, and we'll move on.